Hello, this is Dr. Angela. Welcome to another episode of the Lifestyle MD. This is episode number 21, and I am so excited to be back with you today. The topic of today's episode is how to get back to your exercise routine after you've been away for a while, or getting back on the bandwagon. Just how do you get started again? This is really near and dear to me recently, but I've got countless stories of the times where I've gotten away from my routine and had to kind of reset and get back to what I am accustomed to doing on a regular basis. So if you are a doctor mom or just an exhausted woman, or you know what, I've got some male patients out there and some men who have found this content relevant because let's face it, we all struggle with something from time to time. And the basics of what I'm telling you is applicable across the board. But I will tell you, my main focus is helping high achieving women, much like myself, who have been stretched to the limit. We are the caretakers of all, and we spend the least amount of time taking care of ourselves. It took a while for me to come to terms with or to acknowledge the fact that was inherently who I was and what I did as a woman. I took on that role just naturally. And when I became a stepmother and later had my own son, that was further amplified. I've been on this journey, and this podcast has really kind of risen out of my desire to help other women who are in the same boat. Like I said, in this episode, I'm going to talk to you about how to get back into exercising after a long break. I'll cover some tips and strategies, maybe provide a little bit of motivational advice to help you ease back into the healthy routine that you have probably fallen out of. Now, this is assuming that you have some sort of routine in the first place. No matter how big or small, going from some amount of exercise to none is still not desirable. So I've had many seasons of falling out of routine of exercise, and they've been for various different reasons. In this season, it's been because I am balancing the responsibilities of starting a business. Well, my second business, in this case, my clinical business as a primary care doctor, opening my own direct primary care practice, and that is taken front and center. In the midst of all that, I have also been intentional about prioritizing my role as a mother. I wanted to go on this journey to start my own practice, not only because I wanted to take better care of my patients, but because I wanted to take better care of myself, and I wanted to be more present at home. My family is incredibly important. The family that I created, and also the family that created me. In doing those things, starting my business and being present, I have prioritizing the business and the family and those responsibilities over my regular exercise. I will share some of my lessons and how I've gotten back on track since starting my business February 1st. We are now into June, just turned into June, and I've set a couple new goals. And so I will walk you through how to go about getting back on track. In the first segment, I'm going to talk about different reasons that someone might take a break, how to get back to your regular routine by setting realistic goals, how do you stay motivated once you've gotten back into a routine, and then I'll hit on some additional tips from there. For me, an extended break is like a matter of a couple months. And even in that time of being a break, it's not like I don't exercise. It just becomes much less frequent for me. For some of you, that might be a total drop off of exercise where you're doing absolutely nothing at all. And an extended break might be half a year, a full year, many years, hopefully not. But hey, it is what it is. Don't be discouraged. You can get back to it. So some of those reasons might be injury or illness. And I've dealt with that myself, whether it was chronic back pain and dealing with the consequences of lumbar stenosis, or knee problems from recovering from ACL tear in high school that went on to create further problems with my knee as I tried to get into racing and running, or most recently, my gut health and my gut issues. That was a major setback. And I probably took nearly a 2-year break from my regular routine of exercise involuntarily because of those issues. So there are unavoidable reasons that you need to take a break. And if you're in that season, then you need to honor your body and you need to address the underlying issue, because pushing yourself to be physically active and pushing yourself to move and do more than you can, whether that is through emotional exertion, physical exertion, mental exertion, is not going to serve you. So make sure you listen to your body. Yes, you should move and not be completely sedentary, but don't expect yourself to be doing the things that you were doing when you were in good health. All right. So that's like the first thing I wanted to make sure I touch on. If that's the season you're in, then I want you to bypass this episode or come back to when you're ready to get, back to ramping up things, but focus on your health first. Another reason that people commonly will take a long break or get off track is because their schedules get too busy. This is very common in our society where we're overly scheduled. I recently wrote a blog post about not feeding your kids junk, but in that I talked about one of the reasons that we end up feeding our families such convenient foods and processed foods is because our schedules are so busy. We are overscheduled or overly scheduled. This is something that you can control. You really have to put up more boundaries. As As I've gotten older, I've gotten more comfortable with saying no. One of my best friends always reminds me that no is a complete sentence. You don't have to feel obligated to justify your reason for not wanting to participate. You don't have to justify why you don't want to go out. You don't have to justify why your kid's not coming to the 10th birthday party this week. You don't have to justify all those things. What you do have to justify is whether or not you are personally making choices that are good for you and your family. Many times the decisions that we are making are not only on us. So we have to have that conversation with our spouse or have that conversation with our kids about, hey, look, this doesn't make sense for us to do this. I'd rather us have this time so that we can enjoy each other's company, or I need to regroup, or whatever that may be. Recognizing that when you are a part of a family, when you're a parent, or you're in some sort of situation where you're not the only person who is being affected by it, yes, you're going to have those conversations, and avoiding the conversation and just doing the activities is not better. So if you're having a hard time having those conversations, then maybe that's what you need to work on. You need to work on your communication and work on how to have those difficult conversations with your, what I call your key stakeholders. When I coach women, I talk about the key stakeholders in your life. Who are the people that you need to get on board with this plan? And what are the things that matter to them that might get in your way? Is there some kind of compromise or some place in the middle that you need to meet in order to get what you need and to make sure that you're not also compromising the needs of someone else at the same time? Lack of motivation. This is a little bit more challenging, right? Because it's coming from inside your head. But here's the thing about lack of motivation. It's not that you're not motivated, because if you're listening to this and you're thinking about it, you want to do it, but you're probably too exhausted, too overwhelmed, too something. So instead of focusing on the self-talk of I'm not motivated and feeling bad and giving yourself a hard time about not being motivated enough, why don't you take a deeper dive into understanding what's sucking the life out of you to keep you from taking those steps? Because there's something deeper than just not being motivated. I've talked about that a little bit more in other episodes. I'll come back to that a little bit later. But lack of motivation is another common reason that someone gets out of the routine. And then I mentioned life event. So that can be a new job, a new business, moving, a new baby in the home, adopting a child, a family member moving in with you, illness of a loved one, any number of things, any kind of life event. Similar to how I talked about injury and illness, a life event might be a time where you need to give yourself some more grace and you need to adjust your goals around that life event, because maybe in that season, some other things need to take precedence. Doesn't mean that you should completely give up on being active, but you need to recalibrate. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about what that looks like. So in identifying the reasons behind your long break and getting out of the routine, it's important that you recognize and acknowledge your feelings. It is normal to be frustrated and discouraged after a long break, but you cannot let that prevent you from moving forward. We get stuck in this wheel of negative self-talk often, and that prevents us from taking steps because we've already convinced ourselves that we can't do it. So accept the feelings, acknowledge that they're there, but don't let them hold you where you are. Okay. Yep. It's really frustrating. I'm tired, whatever it might be. So how do I solve that problem? Again, something I got from one of my other good friends: solve the problem. If there's something in the way, something that's holding you back that got you frustrated, solve the problem. So that's what this next section is about: setting realistic goals. Part of solving the problem is setting realistic goals. If you haven't exercised in weeks, that's going to look a lot different getting back to exercise if you haven't exercised in years. You're not going to pick up where you left off. Someone who hasn't been running for a week can more or less get back to the same level of running they did before compared to someone who hasn't run 1 year or 2 years or 3. Running is just an example. Y'all don't need to go run. I'm just using it as an example. Don't get scared. Figure out where you are. Where can you realistically move the needle? If you're at 0 and you're not doing anything, maybe that's walking 10 minutes a day or doing a short home workout 2 days a week. If your idea of being physically active is all or nothing, if you think that you have to be, let's just say an example, you need to work out 5 days a week for an hour each session, and you need to have some high intensity in there along with some yoga and stretching, and then you also need to do 10 or 15 minute warm up bicycle ride. Already I'm exhausted just thinking about it. And if you're creating a vision for what this needs to look like that's insurmountable, you're going to have a much more difficult time getting started. Let's focus on success. Looking at where you currently are. What is a realistic, achievable goal that you can set, and make it something that you can accomplish in the next week? Many of us, especially those of us in medicine, have heard of a phrase called SMART goals. Business folks have probably also heard of this. And the concept of SMART goals is to make your goals specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. That's where the acronym SMART comes from. So set a specific goal. Again, I'll walk for 10 minutes per day. It's measurable. You'll know that you walked for 10 minutes per day because you can measure that. You can check off on the calendar. Yes, I marked I walked on that day, or I did not walk on that day. Is it achievable? It has to be within reach. If you're someone who hasn't been exercising at all, you're not going to set a goal to run 3 miles a day. It needs to be relevant. If your goal is to be more physically active, you're not going to set a goal to read for 10 minutes. And it also needs to be time bound. So set a time frame on it. If we're trying to get back into exercise, I encourage you to stick with 1 week increments. Set goals 1 week at a time, because it's short term enough to where you can actually see your progress, and that progress and those wins every week is going to keep motivating you to go forward. So an example of a SMART goal might be, I'll jog for 15 minutes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then the next week you might say, okay, I'm going to jog for 20 minutes Wednesday and Friday, and then 10 minutes on Monday. Once you have created a SMART goal, the next thing you need to do is have a plan. I've run into this with clients before where they'll have this really great vision and it sounds good on paper, but there's no plan behind it. It's like the person that comes and tells you about this really great business idea that they have, and you're like, okay, so what do we have to do next? And they're like, I have no idea, but it's going to just happen. Well, that's not how things work. When you're creating a plan around a fitness goal, the first step is to assess your current level of fitness and be honest about it. Are you someone who has very little cardiovascular capacity? Do you have much strength? When was the last time you worked out? What did you do? Assess where you are so that you can see what your starting point is. You're going to need to decide what you're building from. You also want to assess what your interests are. If you don't like running, don't set a goal to run. If you don't like biking, don't set a goal to bike. If you're afraid of water, although unless you're me, I set a goal to learn how to swim because I'm afraid of water. Hey, I achieved it. Congratulations. Yay, go me. But pick an activity that you enjoy doing. So assess your fitness level and also what your interest is, because you want it to be something that you'll gravitate to and that you're not going to avoid. You want to create a routine that's balanced. You don't have to hit on every element, but I strongly discourage you from exclusively doing only cardio or only strength training or only flexibility and mobility. Your plan needs to incorporate 3 forms of physical activity: cardiovascular, strength training, flexibility, and mobility. Now, you may do more or less of another thing, but I really strongly believe that all of these things need to be present. Cardio is to help you with your cardiovascular health. It also helps with burning calories. Strength will help you maintain your muscle mass, prevent injuries, reduce risk of falls later in life, also improves your metabolism, lowers your risk of metabolic diseases. And then flexibility and mobility also goes along with strength in terms of preventing injury. Often people neglect the flexibility and mobility and strictly focus on cardio and strength and end up with things like IT band syndrome, plantar fasciitis, back problems, back pain, all the like. And I still am guilty of doing that. Incorporating flexibility and mobility into your routine, especially when you were older, later in life. I was going to say after 40, but really you should probably make sure you're integrating it from the very beginning. But definitely by the time you're in your 30s, it needs to be a regular part of your routine. Cardio is going to include some low impact things like walking, cycling, and swimming. If you're not doing any cardio right now, I would start there. If you're already doing some cardio, you have a pretty good capacity to do something like jogging, then go ahead and do that. You don't have to start with walking, or maybe you can do a mix of walking and jogging. You don't have to go outside, although outside is a really helpful way to boost your endorphins. You can do things indoor on a treadmill, on a rower. There's all sorts of ways to get cardio. You can even do aerobics. You can do HIIT classes, and these things will incorporate both the strength and sometimes the flexibility into the cardio. So if you're clever and you have access, you can do some sort of routine that kind of incorporates all 3 of them at one time for maximum efficiency. This podcast isn't a place for me to give you very specific recommendations on what you should do, because this is really individualized. If you are not sure where to begin, I definitely recommend that you work with a trainer or someone who is a professional who can guide you and direct you on where to get started. But the most important thing I want to make sure I reiterate is you want to avoid injuries, because injuries will set you back to where you just came from. And if you're in the category of not being motivated, where you're going to move into the category of being injured. So take it slow, assess your physical capabilities, and then make sure that you're not skimping on all the varieties to develop a balanced routine. By the way, a balanced routine doesn't mean that you need to spend a half an hour per thing. A balanced routine could even be as simple as 5 or 10 minutes per component. It doesn't have to be long. Set a schedule. Scheduling it into your day or into your week is critical. We schedule our work. We schedule our meetings with friends and family and dinners. We schedule doctor's appointments. If something's on your schedule, you're going to do it. You're going to make time for it. If you don't block it out on your schedule, and this is how I am. If it's not blocked out on my schedule, I'm not setting aside time for it. Now, I am guilty of saying I'm going to do something and then not doing it because I didn't actually commit it to my schedule. It was just in my mind. If you really want to be intentional about your schedule, you need to tell your husband, tell your wife, tell your partners, tell your kids, tell your job, tell your patients, whoever you got to tell. Say, hey, look, I'm exercising at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, or I'm exercising at 6 p.m. tomorrow night, or Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays are my exercise day. In our household, like the biggest thing that gets in our way, and by our way, I mean me and my husband, is not communicating to the other person our intentions to exercise at a given time. Because if I or he communicates to the other person, then I know or he knows that, that one of us is going to have some other responsibilities at night. So if I'm going to work out, then he's going to make sure that our little one that night is getting put to bed and he's getting his teeth brushed and everything's wrapped down. But if no one's communicating about what's happening, one of us is going to compromise. And it's often, well, he does it too, but often I'll find myself saying, oh, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to take care of all these things because this needs to get done. But I never communicated my plan. It was never a part of the schedule. If your schedule is not the only one that matters, which it probably doesn't. So, and if you're scheduling exercise during the time of the day that's going to possibly interact with other people's schedule, make sure you're communicating that. Perhaps the most convenient thing to do is just schedule it at a time where it doesn't impact anyone else but you. If you can do that, by all means do that. All right, staying motivated. Some ways that you can stay motivated. First, find a workout buddy. I don't really get into workout buddies. It's not my thing, but some people are really motivated by having a friend, an accountability partner, whether it's someone that they directly exercise with or someone that they report to. That could also be a coach. It might even be your doctor if you have that kind of relationship with your doctor. Track your progress. Cannot emphasize this enough. Track your progress. You can use apps, you can use a journal, you can use a whiteboard, but document what you've done, whether that's walking, stretching, lifting. It is very motivating to be able to see where you started and where you've moved to. And not only tracking what you're doing with your exercise, but tracking your weight, tracking your measurements. You may not actually lose pounds per se, but you might start notice that inches are shaving off or that you're feeling more energetic. So there's other things that you can measure that are beyond what we normally think of. It's not always just about losing weight. It's about well-being. And there's many other factors that matter in terms of your well-being. Celebrate small wins. You're going to have a lot of small wins before you reach that big goal because every big goal is achieved by taking several steps to get there. If you stick to that walking routine and you walk 15 minutes, 3 days a week, then you need to celebrate. Now, don't celebrate by going to get some ice cream. No. What that means is that you share your achievements with your support network, the people that are engaged or involved or that are cheering for you. Celebrate with them because they want to know how you're doing. They want to be there to support you. Cultivate gratitude. So actually pause and acknowledge what you've done. A lot of times we check the boxes. I did it. And very seldom do we actually take a step back, look at what we've accomplished. To have gratitude about what you've been able to accomplish, it'll help move you out of the mindset of I can't do this to look at what I've done. It will help you avoid emotions like resentment, frustration, and regret if you're focusing on the good that you've accomplished in your efforts. And self-reflection. Celebrating a small victory can also look like reflecting on the journey where you started. If you're just in the beginning, it could be reflecting on the fact that it was just a month ago that you weren't doing anything and now you've made a commitment and you've stuck to it. And that's worth celebrating. 1 month down the road, 3 months down the road, that self-reflection is going to build and it's going to be very encouraging. If we don't take time to have moments of self-reflection, we often miss all of the wonderful things that we've accomplished. Realizing that you are capable and that you are someone who is still growing and evolving is a beautiful thing. And taking time to reflect will help you refine your plan ahead. You may decide that maybe you need to be more aggressive with your goals, or maybe you need to be less aggressive with your goals, or maybe you anticipate that there's going to be a period of time where you need to back off, or maybe you anticipate there's going to be a time where you just need to take a total break. Whatever that may be, pausing for a moment of self-reflection is very important. And I want to make sure that you do that. Also, mix it up. For a long time, I was a marathoner, and then I decided I'm just going to focus on 5Ks. Then I decided I'm going to focus on CrossFit. Then I decided I'm going to focus on bodybuilding. Well, full circle, I just kind of do a smorgasbord of things now because I really kind of like all the things, although now I'm incorporating swimming. I like to challenge myself in new ways. that also is healthy for my body. In the midst of all that, I'm still incorporating things like cardiovascular fitness, strength training, and flexibility and mobility, but I'm just changing how I'm accomplishing it. I also want to encourage you to set a target that you can aim for. And I would say, don't make it a weight loss goal. Instead of making a weight loss goal, say that you want to like carve time off of your walk or carve time off of your run or build up to a new max bench press or a new max deadlift, or maybe you want to increase your flexibility. Set that kind of goal and put a time frame on it. Say, hey, look, in 2 months, I want to be at this number, or I want to be at this goal. Make a target for yourself. Right now, I'm using 5Ks in that way. This actually is a perfect transition to tips and tricks. I started to talk about something that I'm using right now to get motivated or get back on track. It's like a hack. You kind of have to know what works for you. And again, this is where working with a coach can be very helpful. If you're not someone who is introspective that way and understands what works for you, that might be something that you need to have a little bit of guidance. I'm very competitive with my wonderful, loving husband. So when we are doing races together, even though I know he's pretty much always going to beat me, it's kind of like relative. You know, if I'm running at a certain pace, I kind of expect him to be running at a certain pace. I recently did a blog post about rejuvenating my interest in running because I was driven by my desire to improve my pace to be more competitive with my husband. I know it sounds silly, but hey, it works. I am very motivated by competition, no matter what it may be. And even when I'm running a 5K race, my husband, so we'll be married 10 years this October and together for 14. We've done so many races together at this point. It's just one of our favorite things to do. He knows to ask me, who did you pick off at the end? I'll start off the race kind of say, I just want to get it done. I just want to run my race and just go along. But I will at the end, no. If you look like you're like neck and neck with me and you're trying to kick, in other words, you're trying to like sprint it out at the end, I will give my last breath to beat you across that finish line. It's so silly. Even if I was the last person, even if we're the last 2 people running, I'm going to beat you. So whatever it takes, find something that's going to motivate you to get going and get moving. Listen to your body. It's important that if you need to rest. Don't push yourself too hard. Don't stay up late to the wee hours of the night in order to exercise and sacrifice sleep. This is one of my pet peeves with people who are training. Sleep is so critical because you're going to cannibalize some of your benefits if you're not resting and allowing your body time to recover, because it needs to be able to integrate all of those healthy benefits of exercise, proper nutrition. You need to be putting good food in your body, and not just good food, but adequate calories and nutrition. If you're starting a regular exercise routine, cutting calories and going into a calorie deficit, yes, sure, that'll help you lose weight and there is room for that, but you have to make sure that you are supplying yourself with adequate energy to get through your exercise and your routines. And so you're in a deficit most of the day prior to your exercise and right after your exercise is not the time to be cutting your calories. If anything, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself nutrition before and after or around your physical activity so that you can be optimal. And get professional help. If you are struggling, you're not sure how to define your nutrition, your head is spinning, take a breath. You don't have to do it alone. Consider hiring a personal trainer, joining a fitness class, joining a group of other women. The last tip I'm going to give you is use mindfulness and focus on mental health. Exercise for me is a form of mindfulness. I still do listen to things at times when I exercise, but more often than not, I don't listen to anything. I pretty much will only listen to audiobooks and podcasts during races. But when I'm lifting or if I'm doing training at home, I just like the quiet. I like the solitude. I like to be present with my thoughts. It's like a form of meditation for me. So exercise and movement, or even just incorporating some of that mindfulness into your stretching and into your flexibility work can be very helpful to help settle your mind and allow your mind to build new muscles, right, around focus and attention. I have this feeling that someone is listening to this episode today that is going to be driven as a result of it to get back into a routine that they've been putting off, or they're going to create some SMART goals and start doing that exercise or doing that activity that they've been just waiting to get started. If that's you, if you end up taking tips from this episode or finding it useful, I love to hear about it. And if you haven't already rated the episode or liked it or reviewed it, please do. Love to hear what you have to say. That helps more people find this podcast. And we've already been rated as a top 30 lifestyle podcast for moms. So that's pretty exciting. At the end of the day, I'm doing this for you, the listener. All right, that is it for me today. I am going to go for a jog. This is something that I've been putting off. I intended to do it this morning, but I chose sleep. So now that I have checked this off off my list. It is time to get out and go for a run. What are you going to do today? I hope that today is a day that you start setting goals and that you get out and pick an activity and get back on your exercise routine. Thanks for joining me. I hope you would tune in again next time. Take care. Bye.